Let's make history. I believe in equality, freedom and honesty. I believe that I'm a born leader, so follow me. This tune can touch you deep, what can it do for love and peace? Forget the colour of your skin.
Need is a glimmer of sunshine. All we really need is a glimmer of hope. So here's a toast to the old school days that came and went ghost. The days that come quick, then we go and miss the most. We just need a little glimmer and a shimmer of hope. To be a winner and a brother, yeah, he won't be wrong. Complicated.
When I say hi, you say yo, hi, hi. When I say yaga, you say yo, yaga, yaga. When I say hi, you say yo, hi, hi. When I say yaga, you say yo, yaga, yaga. Hey,
You have to go and treat me this way. You don't know what love is. You wouldn't do this if you did. No, no, no,
no, no. We don't want that. No, no. We don't want that. No, no. We don't want that. We don't want them. We don't want that. No, no. We don't want that. No, no. We don't want that. No, no. We don't want that. We don't want them. We don't want them. Look at my face and my everything that you hate. Half this, half that, born in the UK. You wanna stop immigration, well it's too late. We're here living and there's nothing you can do, mate. Worst comes to worst, you should pack your suitcase. Scared little man with a screw loose and a screw face. I'm a hindrance to the ignorance you bring. Doesn't make a difference, the flipping pigment of your skin. Don't blame immigrants for the state of the economy. Some come here for former British colony, some come here to escape British foreign policy. You make a mockery of democracy and equality. Scapegoat the innocent to gain votes. They slip through the net once, but next time they won't. We don't want people like you on our shores. Can't talk to my face, talk to my passport. No, no. We don't want that. No, no. We don't want that. No, no. We don't want that. We don't want them. We don't want them.
I would do that. I'm not a fool to hurt myself, and I was innocent of what they done to me. They were wrong. Let me tell you one more time, they were wrong. I just give it to me one time. Give it to me 2 times, yeah. Give it to me 3 times, yeah. Give me 4 times, yeah. My number, oh yeah.
If it weren't for the ugly, trust me, this place could be lovely. See me just like an ugly. I grew up where the talks be. See too many friends hit the pen, big sentence from a judge beat. We should say it is what it is, but it isn't what it should be. That's life on the end. Keep some real friends.
Malius writers, poets and rhymers are all just imaginative storytellers. Sometimes we live to tell our war stories and come from a place of healing, but we intend on writing and reciting to be our medicine. Then pain we repeatedly choose to vividly relive. Let's let go together today. Let's hammer our boxes and watch from the angle of an eagle. We manifest our perspective, for every thought has power, every word has an energy. I'm going to take hold of what the reins for what the future holds, for what energies and intentions I attract. Because the few that have left their energy inside my womb, with or without consent. This spirit and energies trapped in the vessels in my body, but today I summon these energies and what's that collide with my energy and set them free. Free. Feel alright. Hear the children crying.
can cry, yeah. I give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will sing it. Let's get together and feel alright. Let them all pass on their dirty remarks. There is one question.
Cause we get about the door that we don't wanna go join us, we'd rather go to Honor. When I was young, I used to dream about money, stress about money. But as I grew older, I understood the value of money. Friendships turn funny, cause the currency is no longer loyalty. It's about money, situations so ugly, cause money is the root of all evil. And it's a
She said, I love you, baby. Oh, 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 oh. She said, I love you more than words can say. She said, I love you, baby. Hey, 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 baby. Woo!
I live in from the city and I live it. I keep it real when I spit without the gimmick. It's when I push up in that butchers, man, I leave you shots. Headshots when their head is off the body drops. Make them sick with your happiness, I'm killing with your confidence. Any shifting ambulance, I'm vanishing. Ain't no time for their ignorance, they say your brother's arrogant. If they knew my brother, then they know I'm not. What they do is every academic activist assassinate that alphabet in an ambulance. Actually, I'm Maggie and I'm actually anti-arrogant artist that asking American accents by accident. What's next? Battling battlers with a bag of batteries. Baddies bias blackers because they're badly backwards. We bash with really bashers, get badded bashers. The referee baffle backpackers with bars bad as a bag of beef. What's next? Jack cricket get cancelled, Canada to Canada, cuts on my clip, catch a cavalry, crash into casualty, can't cope with the covers, conversation candidly, cool calculated cannibal that causes carnage casually. What's next? Did he with dignity, did he daddy and this one doesn't think it, I disagree, you did it religious, dummy, I do it differently, I define deliberately, diligent delivery. What's next? Cause everything is evident, my essence is every element, effortlessly edit your enterprise with eloquence, elevate with the energy of Eminem. Every entity that's ever been an enemy, I'm ending them. What's next?
But to struggle for us, in order for us to have the idea of community as something tangible, as something real, as something that still existed. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much to all the staff for making this happen today.
Hip-hop big day. Hip-hop big day. Hip-hop big day. Hip-hop big day. Now everybody. Life is deep, but what you write is cheap. You're the type to cheat that hides what lies beneath. Wanna preach war, who won't fight for peace. Hip-hop is alive and inside of me. Who will match the criticize? I'm a fan of the art who you tried to kill, but it didn't die. It survives, still alive and living a grin. Cause if we're sick of the lyrics and the gimmicks you're spitting, me, I don't beatbox or DJ. I'm an MC and people listen to what we say. They ask me, what's up with hip-hop these days? Cause most of these MCs see fit. Time change and this is a new day. Ain't a deep blue, we see through what you say and don't listen when you're saying your lyrics are too thick. Hip-hop ain't dead, it's just to the UK. Hip-hop ain't dead. 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 Hip-hop ain't.
Just to try and illustrate how important I believe a place like the Highfields Community Centre actually is if I can take it from my own experience, and I'm sure that many people in here will have experiences which are not a million miles away from this. I used to volunteer in the local youth centre. It was one of the first places I performed when I was 17 years old, Lancaster Youth Centre. And there was a young man there that used to be a regular. I didn't know him very, very well, but I knew him well enough to call him a friend. He also used to take part in football classes that I used to be involved in the teaching of under the West Wing, which is just, I would say 50 metres from Grenfell Tower. Now, April of this year, by that point, we'd gone through the issue of the fire, and in the aftermath of the fire, that youth centre had originally, in 2012, been privatised and was run by a company called L.E.A.P, but following that, and you had this kind of logic of the AQAs. You need this quota and this amount of AQAs to be produced by people here to justify your funding in this area. Obviously, it was a setup to fail. And so the centre was closed. In April of this year, I'm walking home late at night and I see the police pull over sharply on the side. I run over and lying on the floor, stabbed, is this young man. Now he survived, thank God he survived, but for me, I felt if there was this local safety net here for him still, if there were the football matches on the Mondays and Fridays, if there was the youth centre open 5 days a week and sometimes 6 days a week, what would be his situation? Would he be on a Saturday night lying on the floor with 3 stab wounds in his body? I don't know. You know, we cannot negate people's choices. We cannot in any way say that people don't make their decisions, whether there is or not, whether there is or there isn't youth services provided for them. But we do know that the thing that really holds the glue of communities together are places like this. And that there are very, very many people in Labrador, for example, and I'm sure in this area as well, that will turn around and say there was this specific youth worker, there was this specific teacher, there was this specific person during my upbringing who saved my life, or who put me on a path towards an amazing profession, who put me on a path towards really nurturing and nourishing the gifts that I had and the raw resources that I came to the place with. And in my mind, there was this refrain playing. Obviously, it's a small, tiny, minuscule fraction of what people go through in all different situations. For the most minimal of political participation, they are slapped back down. You know, we have recently just passed the anniversary of the Peterloo Massacre of 1819. Now, this was a point when the existing civil society at the time came out to the streets and said, look, we're not landed gentry, we don't own property, but we want to participate in the politics of the day. We want to have the right to vote. You know, when we look at the struggle for people to participate in the decision-making of the political class in this country, it was, and that's if we decide that we are at the moment of completion, which I would argue we're not. You're talking about 300 years. You're talking about the 1600s, the Levellers, the Putney debates, them talking about, well, actually, anyone, regardless of whether they have this relationship to property or not, should have the right to vote. You had Peterloo Massacre. You had the Chartists, led by a man called William Cuffy, you know, who, for the record, was Caribbean, who led the democratic movement in this country and was exiled and sent to Tasmania, actually. So you're talking about 3. We're not property owners, we're given the right to vote. So when we look at all of these struggles, we know and are reminded that power concedes nothing without demand. Things don't just end up the way they are because the wealthy and the powerful decide out of the goodness of their heart to bequeath these things to people that are not in the same socio-economic position as them. That's not how history has ever gone, and that's not how the future will go. So it's really important that, you know, we get involved with initiatives like the Leicester Civil Rights Movement and otherwise, and we support amazing people like Priya and all of the other staff here in doing what they're doing. So, what we saying, Highfields? 1, 2, 3, you might take my life. You might take my freedom. You might take my life. You might take my freedom. You can't take my soul. You can't take my soul. They can't use my music to advertise for Coca-Cola. They can't use my music to advertise for Motorola. They can't use my music to advertise for anything but truth. I guess that's the reason the industry won't let me in. Used to be a product or a brand, I'm a human. Refuse to contribute to the gangster illusion. Whether I'm number 1, number 2, or number 3, I'm unique and there will never be another me. And there will never be another you.
proud of who you are, don't copy what the others do. They are not superior, you are not inferior. When we realise that there's gonna be hysteria, not commercial, so it's controversial what my pen is written. When they listen, many in prison from the mental prison. That's why you don't see my face upon the television. But every time I try to sleep, I hear the devil singing. About being part of, quote unquote, the war on terror generation. And we have to be clear about that. We have to be clear about that. During this period of time, the war on terror, which has gone on longer than World War I and World War II put together, for the record, we have seen a major death of civil liberties in this country. As much as people are scared to talk about it, the primary understanding of the Magna Carta, habeas corpus, died in this country for some Muslim people. Now that's something that all communities know, whether they speak about it, whether it's something that's dealt with publicly, it's something that exists. We now live in a time where it is entirely conceivable for a child from a Muslim family to be sitting in class, learning about the Magna Carta and all of the rights that they are afforded by it within this society. But simultaneously, they could be in a situation where a relative of their family has been detained, imprisoned, without ever seeing the evidence held against them, number one, and without ever being judged by a jury of their peers. Number two, that child themselves could be put in a situation where they are reported to prevent for wearing a Palestine badge, for example. This has happened. This has happened in this country. Whether it's something that we're willing to deal with, whether it's something that we're willing to talk about, it has happened. It's hurt people. And so this song is really my experience of being a human, living in this body, with these mythologies like names connected to my person, and traveling and traversing borders across the world. Being detained in this country, under no suspicion of anything. Being detained under the Schedule 7 of the Terrorist Act, which again can be done without any suspicion of any crime committed. A person could be detained. It's estimated 500,000 people have been detained under this act. What effect has that had on us? To have this idea, you know, there's this lecturer called Sinan Amtoun, who's an Iraqi lecturer that teaches at New York University. And they asked him, how did it feel to live in a country that was invading Iraq in 2003? How did you feel? And he said, I felt like a barbarian in Rome, as someone living in New York. We know that during the Roman Empire, the idea that people beyond the borders of the Roman Empire were barbarians, that further imperial conquests were justified by the idea that these people had an inferior moral compass to the people that lived inside. And his description was that that was how he felt. So this song is called Terrorist, and the chorus goes like this. Calling me a terrorist, like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love, but they're calling me a terrorist, like they don't know who the terror is. Insulting my intelligence, oh how these people judge. Cause they're calling me a terrorist, like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. It's high in the sky. Every single day we live together, we love together. That's what life is. Put them up there. Now wave them side to side, now wave them side to side. Everybody wave them side to side, now wave them side to side, now wave them side to side. Everybody wave them side to side, now wave them side to side, now wave them side to side. Everybody wave them side to side, now wave them side to side, now wave them side to side. They're calling me a terrorist, like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love, but they're calling me a terrorist, like they don't know who the terror is. Insulting my intelligence, oh how these people judge.
It seems like the rank heads and crackies are worrying your dad, but your dad's favourite food is curry and kebab. It's funny but it's sad how they make your mummy hungry with her backs while they read the sun and study all the facts. Tell me, what's the bigger threat to human society? Remote control drones killing off human lives on man with. I know you were terrified when you saw the towers fall. It's all terror, but some forms are more powerful. It seems nuts. How could there be such agony? It's like the definition didn't ever exist. I guess it's all just dependent who your nemesis is. Irrelevant how eloquent the rhetoric peddler is. They're telling fibs now. Tell us who the terrorist is. Terrorist. Like they don't know who the terrorist is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. But they calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terrorist is. Insulting my intelligence. Oh, how these people judge. Liverpool was democracy, Mossadegh was democracy, yeah, they was democracy, hypocrisy, hypocrisy. Who you terrorists if you don't want to be a colony? Choose to bow down to a policy of robbery is terrorism. My lyrics, more Vietnam vets, who themselves after the war and died in it. This is very basic. One nation in the world has over 1,000 military bases. They say it's religion, but clearly it isn't. Not just Muslims that oppose your imperialism. Was who got shot as a Muslim? Nah, I didn't think so. Was Castro a Muslim? I didn't think so. It's like the definition didn't ever exist. I guess it's all just depending who your nemesis is. Irrelevant how eloquent the rhetoric peddler is. They're telling fibs now. Tell us who the terrorist is. Calling me a terrorist. Like they don't know who the terrorist is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. But at this stage, that when we're looking at the Palestinian population in Gaza, we're talking about an imprisoned population for really the past almost 10 years. We're talking about 95% of the water that is in Gaza is not fit for human consumption. We're talking about a place where the United Nations have said that by 2020 it will not be livable for human beings. We're talking about the majority of the population there are refugees and have the right under UN Resolution 194 to return home. And so the demonstration is selling, since 2014, £490 million worth of military components to the state of Israel that are being used. We look at some of the sales have been of components of sniper rifles, and those have been used to target people. And hundreds of people have died, and thousands have been injured, actually, since the beginning of the Great March of Return around March 30th. So when I made this song, it was to express solidarity with the perseverant Palestinian people who, since the Nakba of 1948, which resulted in the transfer of the majority of their population, have really been struggling and have really received very little support from, whether it's their neighbours or the quote-unquote international community. So what that meant was grassroots organisations had to participate in these convoys to break the siege. They had to participate in boats to attempt to break the siege. You have students and injured people trying to leave on boats. Since then, you have people trying to bring medical supplies and really being having all types of repression visited upon them. And I think it's quite horrific what we've allowed to happen and what we've watched happen to the Palestinian people. We know that really in the Balfour Declaration, which was a colonial document published by the foreign minister of this country, you had Palestine given to what was at that stage a group of people who were lobbying a government in a time of war. And that led the way to, of course, 1936, when you had one of the longest strikes in recorded human history, led by Palestinian civil society against the British Mandate rulers at the time. And at that point, Britain saw its way to creating the skeleton of what would later become the Israeli army, which, you know, now is per capita the biggest arms supplier in the world. That doesn't mean that, you know, it's The United States is by far the world's biggest arms supplier, but if we're actually talking about per capita, we're talking about, in a population sense, Israel, which is the size of Wales, is actually the homeland security's capital of the world. So, long live Palestine! While we listen to tunes made by ignorant fools, Israel, look the UN from delivering food, they bring in the troops and we won't even glimpse of the news of the products we are quick to consume. And this is not simply a question of different reviews. Forget emotions, this is fact. What I spit is the truth. It's not about if you're a Christian or if you're a Jew. They're just people living in different conditions to you. They still die when you run their schools, mosques and hospitals. It's not because of rockets. Can you stop this soul? I'm not related to the strangers on the TV, but I relate, cause those strangers couldn't feed me. Words can never ever explain the raw tragedy. It's not a war, they're just murdering more rapidly, and we are automatically supporting pure. Imagine how you feel if this was your family. Singing with me now, free, 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 free,
Quality of all and the supremacy of none. I believe.
Gonna bring me greater things. Yes, I believe we can be anything. Ain't impossible, it's easy to achieve. Ain't nothing wrong, you can chase your dream. Make your moves and take the lead. I believe we can do anything.